Hi, everyone. It's Cody Galloway. Welcome to the meet and greet tonight. And I have a special guest with me. I'm in my office, and Mike Moyle has joined me. So thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
We are going to talk about our third meet and greet this week. And I guess I'll go back and do a little bit of an overview first. So those that are new to this series can kind of know what's going on and what we're doing here. So my name is Cody Galloway, and I am running in District 15 for the state Senate position. And there's three topics, three legislative priorities that I worked on during the session and that I'm working on during my campaign. And these three important topics are, that I always say are, I'm pro-freedom, pro-education, and for low taxes. And we've done three different sessions where we talked about each of these topics in depth and then took questions and answers. So we did the pro-education one 3 weeks ago. And then 2 weeks ago, we did the pro-freedom one. And we had a special guest then as well that talked about some of the legislation that was happening to help make sure that we keep Idaho free and maintain those constitutional rights that are so important to us. And this last one is on low taxes. And that is a big priority for me. And as I've talked to you in the district, a big priority for you as well. But I am not an expert on that. So I have brought in the expert, Mike Moyle.
I'm not the expert.
He's saying he's not, but he's got some good experience.
I just take paying taxes.
He doesn't like paying taxes. That's good enough, right? So we're going to talk. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about two things that happened during session. It'll probably take me 8 minutes. Then I'm going to turn the time over to Mike, and he's going to talk to you guys about property tax and some great things that are on the horizon with that. And then after he's done, in about the last 10 minutes, we'll leave open for questions. So I know lots of you have questions, and you can start typing those in right now. Nicole is helping, and she's going to be documenting all those questions as they come in so she can flash them up on the screen. And then together, we'll see if we can answer some of these questions that you have and just try to be accessible to you as our audience today. Okay, so what we're going to start with is low taxes is our priority. And I want to talk about, I stole this one from Mike because really he knows the most about this, but it's the one thing I can talk really easily about. And that's the income tax that we worked on this year at the State House. Oftentimes people come to us and they are frustrated with their taxes. They're too high in every aspect. They think they're too high in sales tax, it's too high in income tax, it's too high in property tax. But as a state legislature, our biggest way that we can impact that is with income tax. So we did some great work this session, and everyone agreed, the House, the Senate, the governor, which is always a good thing. And we were able to give $600 million in tax relief. And about half of that came as a one-time rebate. So you probably, some of you have seen this right in your banks or receiving a check. And that was a rebate of 12% of what you paid the previous year in taxes. So and the lowest it could have been was $75 per person in your house. So those tax rebates went out already. And or if you're still filing taxes, maybe they're still coming out, but they started going out at the end of March. I know people were getting them. So that was done really quickly. And that is awesome because what happens is the state of Idaho we had collected a surplus. And whenever you collect too much money, one of the important things that you can do is return it back to the people that paid it. And that's you, the taxpayers. So half of that $600 million was already returned to you. The other half of tax savings is going to be ongoing. And essentially the tax rate was dropped. So in the state of Idaho, we lowered the amount of tax brackets. I think we were 5 to 4 or 6 to 5, dropped one less brackets, and then lowered the rate down to 6%. And that's the top bracket, which is pretty much everyone in the state of Idaho pays that amount if you have more than $5,000 of taxable income. So we did two things with income tax. We gave money back in a surplus, and then we also lowered the rate so that going forward, we'll collect less taxes so we won't end up with this surplus, and you get to keep more of your money in your pocket. Which is probably the best place for it to be because you obviously know how to spend it better than your government should be spending it. So that's number one thing I'm going to talk to you about is that income tax. And that was a win because oftentimes at the State House, not everyone agrees. but that was something that pretty much everyone agreed on. It was the first bill out of the chute, and it and passed really well. So that was a thumbs up, and we're excited about that one. I'm going to share one other bill that is related to taxes that didn't pass, but I feel like it's important to show the good news and the bad news, and let you kind of know what people are trying to do to help. So there was a bill that came through the House, and it essentially created a revolving loan fund for charter schools. One of the reasons your property taxes are so high is because of school bonds and levies. And one of the reasons those are high is because they're always building buildings. And one of the ways that the state of Idaho can help lower those is by helping build and fund our school buildings. And this was a bill came through where we were going to throw $50 million at this fund, where charter schools could come in and they could use that to build a facility. And they actually build these way more affordably than non-charter schools, which is also a tax savings. But they would be able to borrow from this fund, build their school building, and then repay it so that another school could borrow that again, and it would continue on. So it was a great source of revenue or a great use of our revenue, so that we could build more schools and continue to build those. And eventually that would lower your property taxes. But that bill went through the House and then got stuck in the Senate and didn't pass. So that's something that maybe we'll try again next session. But I always like to share good news, things that we're able to accomplish, and then also sometimes things that we're working on that we didn't get quite over the finish line, but we're going to continue to work on those and not be done with it. So those are my two things that I wanted to share on taxes. And I can see some of your questions are coming in, so that's good. Keep those coming in. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn the time over to Mike, and he is going to, I should call him Representative Moyle. Should I do that?
Better.
Okay.
Mike's better.
I like Cody, so I always like Cody, but okay. So Representative Moyle or Mike is going to talk to us a little bit about what's happening in the property tax.
Yeah, let's talk about property taxes for a second. I think that when we start talking about property taxes, one of the things we need to do is set the ground rules. I think there's a misconception out there. I hear it often where people say that the state's collecting property taxes, my taxes are going up. You need to understand that the state of Idaho collects no property taxes. The state of Idaho spends no property taxes. Those are all collected and spent by locally elected officials, your county commissioners, your city councilmen, your schools, if you pass supplementals and bonds. But those are all collected and spent locally. I think that's important. So when you have the state come in and try to force their budgets down, you get into this issue where they don't like us trying to take away local control. And you saw that a little bit last year. And maybe a little history lesson on last year. Last year, the legislature did pass a property tax bill, and you've heard a lot of the cities and taxing districts complain about it because it didn't cut their budgets, but it prevented their budgets from growing at an exorbitant rate, capped them at 8%, where in the past, some of those budgets were growing at 8, 9, or more. Some of them were going 14, 15. We had some over 20. We had one local city propose a 44% increase in property taxes. So the bill we passed last year capped them at that 8%. And that was important because it slowed down the growth in property taxes. Didn't fix the problem, but it started down the road of fixing the problem with these out of control property taxes. In fact, what it did was it created a situation where last year you had the smallest increase in property taxes statewide at 3.2% in over a decade. So it did slow down the growth. Didn't fix it, but it slowed down the growth. So when the legislature got there this year, we started looking at other ways we could help in regards to the property tax problem, because we know it's a problem. How can we help? So we passed 3 bills this year along the lines of property tax relief. You probably didn't hear about them, so let's talk about them. One of them, and the big one, dealt with public defenders. The bill takes away the responsibility of the county to provide for public defenders, and it also takes away the responsibility of the county to pay for indigent care for those who do not have insurance. Currently, if somebody goes to the hospital and has a claim, and they don't have insurance, the first $11,000 before this bill passed was picked up by the county. No longer does that happen. That saves the county money. The other thing it did is it did away with all the indigent care mill levies across the state. It did away with the levy rate. I don't know exactly how much it saves Ada County yet, we'll see, but it will save money for the county across the board. It does away with a tax you're paying now. It just goes away. It's a good thing. And there'll be some more adjustments to that bill as we go forward, and we try to figure out ways to keep the counties whole and make sure it works. But that went into place this year, and you'll see savings from that next year. The other bill that we did is we found out that we have a lot of people in the state of Idaho who are getting more than one homeowner's exemption. That's a problem. When a home comes on the market, it comes on at the top rate, where the value is, and it's taxed at that rate. But when they get the homeowner's exemption, they pay the tax on a lower number, but the local taxing district still collects the money. So that amount of money that new homeowner is not paying in taxes shifts to everybody else, by the way, including other homeowners. So it shifts. So we found people that were having sometimes as many as, I'm told, 9 homeowners exemptions. That means everybody else was paying more taxes because these individuals were taking advantage of it. It was kind of interesting too. We found individuals don't even live in the state that were getting a homeowner's exemption. They may buy a house here and Airbnb it or something else. So that will create property tax relief as we find out who those folks are over the next 2 years and can get them back where they're paying the taxes that they owe on our due. Another thing that came up with property taxes is, if you've watched, the federal government is literally giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the cities and counties throughout the state of Idaho. If they got a bunch of money this year, they'll get a bunch of money next year. The problem we had was there was no mechanism for the cities to provide property tax relief with that money. They couldn't just say, hey, we got this extra $20 million of CARES money. Why don't we just give it back to the taxpayer? Now, the federal government allows them to give it back as tax relief, but the law in Idaho did not allow that. So we passed a bill that says, hey, you cities, if you choose, it's not mandatory, it's voluntary, but if you choose, you can give those funds back and provide property tax relief with that money or any other budget savings you have. Remember, most taxing districts, not all of their money comes from property taxes. And in fact, in most cases, it's less than half. I think the counties on average are around 40-45%. The cities are less. They're around 20 or 25%. They get their other revenue from other sources like impact fees or building fees or things like that. And they also, by the way, get money from the state. And let's talk about that. And that's one of the other bills that the legislature did that you talked about failed. One of the ones that we passed in the House that failed in the Senate forced tax relief for some of the money the state gives to them. And let's talk about that. When you go out and buy a new car, for example, and pay the sales tax on that new car, 11.5% of that money goes back to the cities, the counties, or the other taxing districts. So the state of Idaho shares the revenue that we receive from sales tax, 11.5%. That money goes back and they can use it for whatever they want. The bill that we passed out of the House that died in the Senate would have required half of that money to go for property tax relief. And to give you an idea of how much money it is, it's over 300 million. It is growing. Last year, it grew by 23.5 million. This year, those local governments will receive over $50 million. So we were trying to get $25 million of relief with this new money. It's new money. It's manna from heaven. It's growing economy here. We're going to help the cities and counties and their taxing districts. Here's some money from the state to help you with that. We also did another bill that probably I've talked about last year for roads, where we increased the amount of money that comes from that sales tax distribution up to from 11.5, we added another 4% to it. And they can use that for roads, and that goes to the road district. Some cities provide it, some don't. Some counties provide it, some don't. In Ada County, for example, you have a countywide one, and they'll get their proportionate share of that money, which is a good thing. But as we talk about property taxes, we need to find a solution going forward. And I'm looking forward to your questions, and we can kind of maybe talk more about that if you have more questions about property taxes. But I think it's imperative that we remember where we started. The state of Idaho doesn't collect them, and the state of Idaho doesn't spend them. It's all those budgets and all done locally. It's all tied to a budget. If the budget goes up, you're going to pay more taxes. If the budget goes down, most likely you're going to pay less. And there's a lot of other options we can talk about with your questions when it comes to property taxes. But I think it's important to remember that.
Do you see why I invited him? He can talk fast, and he had all of that right on the tip of his tongue. So excellent.
Not too fast.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're going to open it up to questions now, and I've got Nicole over here with it. So the first one is, why is it so hard to repeal the grocery tax?
That's good. You want me to answer that one?
We can both try.
You want the history on that?
You know the history. I'll tell you the new. Yeah, you go for it.
When the state of Idaho passed sales tax, it passed in I believe it was 67, and it was sold as SOS, Save Our Schools. We didn't have a sales tax before that.
Okay.
And when they put the sales tax in, there was a concern about food and paying for food, because they didn't want to tax the food. And so at that time, they provided a food credit. Everybody calls it the grocery tax credit. It's not, it's a food credit. And that food credit was provided so that the Idahoans would be able to not have to, get the money back that they were paying on when they bought food. Idaho's a destination state. Well, let me give you a little more history. Let me just keep going. So in 2015, this is interesting, Representative Moyle and Bedke, which is interesting, brought a bill forward to eliminate the sales tax on food. And we used the SNAP definition, which is the bill you've heard about that's out there. And said, we're going to use the SNAP definition to eliminate sales tax on food. We got it out of the House, out of the Senate committee, and then the Senate killed it on the floor. And it kind of went away. Later on, a few years later, the Senate sent a bill back that I carried that did away with the sales tax on food, and the governor repealed it. Since that time, though, there's been a lot more information come out when we talk about sales tax on food. And let's talk about that. One, you've got the Tax Foundation that brought out an article, I think just like 2 weeks ago, that says you don't want to do that. You're better off getting a credit back like Idaho does and keep taxing the food. And they use several reasons. One, because it gets back to the Idaho citizens, the citizens of the state. Two, Idaho's a destination state. You have like over 5 million people that drive through Idaho Falls every year to go to Yellowstone Park. They stop and buy groceries and pay taxes. They pay the tax. You have an element of Idaho citizens that are not here legally. They pay the tax. You have an element of people that come here and recreate. They pay the tax. So there's been this kind of shift away from that toward we ought to probably collect the tax. The best tax is one that's paid by somebody else, which is what's going on when those other groups are paying it.
Right.
But then the overlying reason that I have a concern with it is, how do you know you got the money back? Are we going to create some kind of police that's going to go out and make sure that the store didn't just suck that up in profits? Think about it this way. If you go buy, and I love Dreyer's strawberry ice cream. So if I go buy it at Albertsons in Eagle and I go buy it at Winco, it's a lot cheaper at one of those stores. I'm not going to tell you which one. I think you can figure it out. So why? Because the stores do checks. They want to know what you're willing to pay. And if you were willing to pay more, then they're going to charge you a little more. That's why one store has a higher price than the other one. Right. They know what you will, that's why these phones get us in trouble everywhere. They know where you'll pay a little more in one store versus another. So then if you turn around and take the sales tax off of food, how do you know you got the money? How do you know that they didn't just raise the prices to suck it up? Especially right now with this inflation thing going on. How do you know you got it back? The only way you're going to guarantee that the Idaho citizens get it back is to give it back to them in a refundable credit, which we have now. You get the money if you don't owe taxes in your hand. Now, is it high enough? In my opinion, no. The legislature raised it $20 this year. That's not enough. In fact, if you remember, I brought a bill that raised it to $175 for every man, woman, and child. I think it needs to be substantially higher. I think that Idahoan citizens ought to get their money back, and I think they ought to get interest on it for having to wait a year to get it. I get all that. But I also want to make sure you get it. And I think that there's this perception, if you quit charging sales tax on food, that you're going to get the money back. And I guarantee you that somebody's going to make more profits, that the money's not going to necessarily go back to the citizens unless you have some kind of price control where you're going to go back out and make sure each one of these stores are giving you the money back. And how are you going to do that when already there's a price difference between the same products from one store to another? Right. The thing about, and this is coming from a guy that brought the bill, I got it almost passed. I got it to governor and he vetoed it. I mean, I was there, but the more I learn and talk to these individuals that are in that business, they are telling me you're not going to get the money back to the citizens unless you give them credit. If you take it off of food, the price of food will go up to match it, because they do these price checks to see where is your point of resistance on buying a product. So as we look at that issue, I think there's an answer. I think that we're better off with a credit. That's my opinion. There's been a lot of debate. I think that it's really easy to say, don't tax my food. Yeah. And I agree, don't tax your food. Yeah. But I want to make sure you get the money back and it doesn't go into profits for somebody else. So it's not an easy one to just fix.
I think I'll just say just a little bit on this too. This is a really good explanation of what's happening with the grocery tax, and looking at it from a broader perspective of just I don't like the government getting my money. I want to just address too that there was a grocery tax bill that that people kept hearing about on the floor. It was a procedural, something that was happening procedurally on the floor, and it was bypassing the committee process. So lots of times there were people that were voting against the wanting and interested in talking about grocery tax repeal, but not in the manner that it was coming up on the floor. And I don't fully understand all of the procedures that are happening in the House, but I looked at it as this is like I sit down and play a game of Monopoly with my kids, and then halfway through, my 7-year-old decides that he wants to change the rules. And that's frustrating to people that started at the beginning. So we did have some rules in the House, and generally what's best is that bills go through the right committee and they have hearings and they have input from the community and they get enough support to be presented on the House floor. And when we have personal bills, those are more conversation starters. But if we take a personal bill and then we vote on it on the floor, then we've bypassed a big part of an important part of how we govern in Idaho by including the people and having a robust discussion. So there were a lot of people I know that have had questions about why people voted against the grocery tax 30 times. It wasn't the grocery tax that people were voting against. It was voting against, are we going to change the rules in the middle of the game? And do we even like these rules? So I don't know if that makes sense, but I know a lot of people have asked that question as well. Okay. Have you read this one? This is a long one. Okay, I'll read it out loud. This is from Deborah. She said, my husband and I are retired seniors. We have lived in District 15, same house for 44 years and plan to stay here. There are a lot of out-of-staters that are requiring homes, schools, and infrastructure. We've paid our property taxes, supplementing schools with ongoing bonds, etc. I believe our new neighbors should assume their fair share in the developments necessary for their influx. I also believe there should be an age where seniors age out of property tax requirements. Thoughts?
Oh, you want me to answer that one? I can talk about that for a minute. I one of the things the legislature did do last year, which will address part of your concern there, is that before the bill we passed last year in the legislature, every time a new house was built next to you or a new neighborhood, your taxes went up. Mm-hmm. There was this phenomena that the legislature put in long before we were there in 1996 that allowed what's called new construction. Before that, property taxes were capped at 5%. And when they allowed the new construction, that's how you got these double-digit budget increases. And so somebody builds a new house next to you, your taxes went up. We fixed that last year. That no longer happens. Your taxes will go down actually with more growth because it will force down the budgets. And so that helps. When it comes to eliminating property taxes for one group, that's been talked about. But then you have, which group do you eliminate it on? What about the new family with the new children? They have the same issue as my parents that are elderly and on fixed income. There's a balance there. I think the best thing we can do is look at some kind of a fix overall that alleviates the pressure on property taxes. One of the things you saw introduced last year in the legislature that go all the way was one to raise the sales tax a little bit and take away all of the property taxes except for those that you voted on, like bonds and schools, which would have alleviated somewhere between 70 and 80% of every Idahoan's property tax.
Say that again. That's really a big number.
Yeah. We would have raised the sales tax a little bit, like 1.85. And then we would have taken and increased the food credit to 175 to help offset the increase in sales tax. Right. And then we did away with all of your property taxes on owner-occupied homes except for bonds and supplementals that you voted on, right, which in most cases is 70 to 80% of your property taxes would have gone away. And in some cases, all of them would have gone away. Some of the rural districts and urban districts do not have supplementals and they do not have bonds. So they would have paid no property tax on owner-occupied homes. Wow. Now, there was some, it's a good idea if you think it through, because if you go look at your taxes and get rid of 70% of it and then say, how much does 1.85% I'm going to have to spend to pay that back to 1.85. So you're going to find it's a lot of money. You're better off doing the deal. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about, and you've heard it in some of the forums in our area, I don't know about yours, about local option sales tax. Mm-hmm. The locals would like to have the ability to raise your sales tax to increase their budgets. In California, when they passed Prop 13, they allowed the locals to raise the sales tax. What this bill does is it says, we're going to raise the sales tax a little bit now. It puts it less than the surrounding states that have it. Utah's more than us. Washington's more than us. Nevada, California, they're all more than us. But it would also then provide property tax relief with that, which would be immense. It's a lot. And that bill's out there. And I think it'll be discussed again next year because it's a big deal. It will help alleviate the concerns that I think it was Debbie or whatever, with your property tax. It will fix that problem if we can do away with 70 or 80% of your property tax. So there's ideas out there to try to address it. But when you try to exempt one group, it gets harder because you're picking winners and losers. And that makes it a little bit tougher to pass in the legislature because, yeah, it helps my senior grandparents. Well, I'm almost there. but it hurts those new families on the bottom end. So somehow you have to balance it.
Right. So I like, Mike is doing a great job of getting the details and he has all the numbers. I just want to add to that. But one thing that's important as we look at this, we've done lots of little things as a legislature. This is a big thing. And always it seems like we can chip away at the block and do little actions and pass it, but you don't see huge change in your property tax bill. What this idea here, this is a big idea. This is going to take, that makes a huge difference in your property tax. And I really obviously we need to study more and have more information on that, but I like the idea of doing that. In Idaho, our Constitution protects property's a right, and it's not like that in the US Constitution, but in Idaho it is. So when we start taxing people on their property to the point where, like Deborah was saying, the increase that she's had over 44 years, that's a real problem. And that does require significant big hammer at the block instead of chipping away at that property tax law. So I'm excited about learning more about that bill and seeing that happen.
Yeah, the bill was introduced, and you remember our Constitution also hampers this. That's why we can't do like a Prop 13 in Idaho, because our Constitution says you have to treat like properties the same. So to do a Prop 13, we would have to change the Constitution. We can get around it, though, if we do an exemption. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with this idea, provide an exemption for those and replace that money with the sales tax.
Yeah. I'm excited to learn more about that. I feel like everyone keeps looking for the big answer, and we've just kind of thrown little answers out there. But I feel like that could be a big answer and a big solution. So
the question here, I can see this one, is if the sales tax is raised to help property tax, is there a way to stop sales tax from raising too much in the future? There is, and you can put it in the bill. And it's been interesting when we introduced that bill. In Idaho, there are a couple of places that have local option sales tax, resort cities. So like McCall or Donley or Sun Valley. Right. Some of these cities, though, that have local option sales tax today are running it through the roof. And when we brought that bill forward, we had legislators from some of those areas come and say, we love the idea. Can we cap it so that these areas with local option don't go through the roof? And I think that we could do both. We could cap it at that, whatever the number ends up being. And yes, we could cap it so it doesn't grow in the future.
That's all. Awesome.
We're out of time.
I will. Yeah, we are out of time. So I'll just add one more thing on the sales tax. And this is funny. I asked my husband, because as we were going back and forth, we were like, well, what do you think? Do you like? And I asked this question to you as well. And I'd love your feedback. Email me or reach out to me, call me, text me. I'd love what your feedback is on that sales tax proposal, where your sales tax goes up a little bit, but your property tax would go down 70, 80%, and hear what you think. I asked my husband that question. I said, what do you think about this? Does it sound good to you? And he said, well, actually, I just think you should get rid of both of them.
I'm with him.
And I said, okay, that's great. Now, how do you want to pay for the policemen that are protecting our children and the schools that our kids are going to? So anyways, I would be interested in your feedback. And I know this isn't quite the forum to get what you have to say, but please reach out to me, because that helps me make better decisions as well. Hear what you see and what you say as we go forward.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
Remember, again, all those budgets and property taxes are locally controlled and locally assessed. Think about Meridian's budget, which grew 39% last year, and I'll bet they've got tens of millions of dollars in savings right now. In fact, I was heard a number the other day, and I can't verify it, somebody name it. Those individuals that you've locally elected in those cities and counties and highway districts and sewer districts and all, they have the ability today to lower their budgets with the money that's coming in and to provide property tax relief as the legislature tries to find a path forward to do bigger property tax relief. So please do not forget to remember, locally collected, locally spent, go get them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
I
for
so
having me.
appreciate it. Thank you for all of you for joining, and we will see you soon.